Welcome to Silicon Valley. I'm looking for the next big invention.
And I'm here to kick your ass into shape.
I am going to conquer the world! This is your life!
We make dreams a reality.
In the end, it could be worth bazillions.
$1 billion in revenue!
Bazillion Dollar Club. Series premiere Tuesday, September 22nd at 10 on SyFy.
Hi everyone, welcome to Talks at Google. My name is Dana Han-Klein, and today it is my pleasure to welcome Dave McClure from 500 Startups and Brady Forrest from Highway 1. So give me a round of applause. Guys, welcome to Google. Do you mind telling us a little bit about yourselves and how you found yourselves as sort of members of the Bazillion Dollar Club?
I don't think either of us are quite bazillionaires yet.
Yeah, still working on it. I started off as a small boy in a farm town. Grew up on the East Coast, West Virginia and Maryland. Went to Hopkins. Kind of came out to California as a geek and programmer in '89, which seems like such a long time ago now. But variously had different roles here in the Valley. Programmer, entrepreneur, worked at PayPal doing some marketing for a while. Angel investor, and then eventually venture capitalist, I guess. Yeah, sort of.
I grew up in Jersey, went to RPI, engineering, did inventory control systems for a while.
Fascinating.
I know, it was amazing. Then consumer software, then O'Reilly Media, where I started Ignite, and then ended up running a hardware accelerator. And luckily, Dave and I had met back in 2005. Back when I was still at Microsoft and you were at Simply Hired.
Right.
And we just stayed in touch over the years. And about 2 years ago, Dave was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a TV show, but would you, they also want hardware in this. Do you want to get involved? And
Basically, I was trying to work my way into a TV show, but I needed somebody sexier than who was doing
To
hardware.
amplify the sexy, yeah.
Yeah, well, look at this package. I mean, come on. But yeah, I guess it took a while. Eventually, we kind of got there.
yeah. And now Highway 1 is a hardware accelerator in San Francisco, and our 5th batch started 2 weeks ago.
And I guess 500 Startups is an accelerator. Whoa!
Oh no.
And breaking my shit. And seed fund. And we mostly in San Francisco and Mountain View, but also about 15 other countries around the world.
Great. Can you walk us through just a typical schedule for an accelerator program?
I guess it varies by program, but probably between 3 to 6 months. Ours is usually about 4 months of kind of active involvement, although there's maybe a month on either side, kind of hazing people coming in and kicking them out on the way out.
Yeah, they don't like to leave. The free office
You give
space
them money
and the snacks
and they
and,
just hang
in our case,
around.
the shop.
Yeah, we know nothing about that here. But
Yeah, I've heard about the Google 15.
It's the 20, the Google
Oh,
20. Yeah, 15 was college. But could you talk to us a little bit just about, for those who don't necessarily know what it's like to be in an accelerator program, kind of the things that are involved for the sort of mentees or the applicants, and what they can expect to gain out of it, and what you guys kind of provide as mentors?
Well, each accelerator program has a different specialty. Ours, in particular, focuses on hardware. So we have 1,000 square feet of shop space. I've got mechanical engineers, electrical engineer, a shop tech, a designer, all of whom specialize in helping to move companies with a prototype forward until it becomes a product. At the same time, we work with them trying to figure out if they're consumer, what their crowdfunding strategy is, what their revenue model looks like, how they can actually afford to manufacture the product. Along the way, we also help them out with their pitch. Because at the end of the day, on your demo day, you want to be able to tell your story and show your product.
I think there's a lot of stuff that we try and help them with. The primary thing is we give them money. We try and help them with customer acquisition. We try and help them with additional funding. But we do introduce them to mentors along the way. Most of our companies are software focused, whether that's web or internet or mobile. Most of them come in with a functional product and usually a small amount of customers or revenue. We hopefully try and help them get to a larger amount of customers and revenue.
$1 bazillion.
$1 bazillion. And most of this culminates in a demo day with the companies presenting their products to a large room of, hopefully a large room of investors. And if they're fortunate, some of them raise $1 million, some of them don't.
Mm-hmm. And kind of the difference is, generally my teams are trying to make one of something, like by the end of the program. So like one of the teams, Spin from the show, is trying to make a centrifugal coffee machine. And they've made a couple of prototypes, and they're trying to make kind of like a final prototype that they can then really demonstrate that the product works and is worth investing in.
Right.
And can you guys talk a little bit about kind of, you do have different emphases, in terms of your backgrounds, in terms of what you focus on, but this show is kind of bringing those together a little bit. And it's also, you guys it seems like you have sort of different mentor styles, maybe?
Really?
Exactly the same person.
Exactly. What?
We finish each other's
sentences.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe just a tiny.
But so what's that collaborative process kind of been like on this? Or you can
pretty
say no
seat of
comment.
the pants, actually. We've been kind of figuring it out as we go along, but it's been interesting to like help each other's companies out, because Dave has wisely avoided hardware for years.
we have one of the companies in the show, but one of the companies in the show is hardware based out of our program, which has been great for them to, get access to Brady and We1 and PCH.
Yeah, and this is bringing me back to software, which was my roots for a long time, especially working with developers. So I think we've just been, trading off our complementary skills here.
But I think there's probably a setup as the odd couple of the nerd kingdoms of sorts.
Yeah, you don't want to
spin-off,
read the
pitch
pilot for
spin-off
the second show.
I think maybe we do. So like the Bay Area is pretty immersed in the tech culture, but are there some kind of things that you'd want an audience who aren't necessarily familiar with the challenges of being in this sort of environment to know going into it?
I mean, I think the intent of the show is, to be entertaining, but also to tell the story of what it's like to be doing a startup in the Bay Area, and not to manufacture too much of that storyline. I think we're really trying to be somewhat authentic to what people go through. You don't really need to create a lot of drama. Startups have enough fail along by themselves that it's pretty dramatic already. Software companies raise money, startup founders break up, sometimes their shit works, sometimes it doesn't.
I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do the show is because you read a lot about funding announcements, and I think people outside Silicon Valley think that's all that happens here. But it's actually a lot of long nights, it's a lot of friendships, it's a lot of really trying to create something, and that's what I want to show, and that's what I'm hoping is shown.
And I think also there's a lot of people who have the misconception that everything turns out to be Facebook or Snapchat or Google, and actually most shit fails.
Yeah.
I think fortunately in our programs, at least they have some survivability for a year or two, and the majority of companies do raise enough money to have at least a shot at becoming something interesting.
Every once in a while you get a wildfire, maybe.
We do,
which
occasionally.
we've heard of here.
Right.
No, I think there's definitely sort of a glamour associated with the kind of startup culture that we feel here, and a lot of people are afraid of kind of revealing the tough parts of it and the struggle that goes into it. And do you think this is going to kind of open up that conversation between both the people who are trying to enter into these fields and the people who aren't as familiar with it?
I think it'll give them a good feel for what the pressure is like. I mean, you're working with people when you don't have much money. Some cases you're just getting to know them, and you're trying to create something. And just the pressure they're under is pretty unimaginable if you're not in there with them.
I think maybe there's been some other treatments on different shows in the past, and maybe some other ones that are more recent, where it's a little bit more fanciful, and it's maybe not what exactly happens. A little bit too much of either nightclubs in San Francisco or people just like coding, and that's certainly part of it. But I think trying to present that people are getting ready to pitch to investors, how they figure out whether the product is working, whether people like the product. Figuring out, how to grow a small business into a larger business. So,
and also, I mean, these people have been working on it for months or years before coming to us, and they keep going well beyond. We just brought in a company that's raised about $400,000, and they've been around for 2 years, and they're deployed in 270 homes around California. And now they're trying to figure out how to do mass production and figure out if they can raise additional funds. But they're just with us for 4 months.
But I think also, there is somewhat, a little bit of the American dream writ in the geek fashion where, people bust their ass, occasionally raise $1 million, and occasionally create a company that's worth something and hopefully grows on to become larger. And that is a pretty compelling story. And yeah, we hope to have some of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's just limited to the tech industry, I
Right.
think it's what kind of drives
Yeah.
industry. What would you, so as you said, like a lot of these groups are kind of working with these projects for a really long time before they even get to you. And sometimes companies and groups of working people like need to make really tough decisions, maybe in terms of changing direction, maybe in terms of like, hey, this isn't working. What do you say to people like that when they're, when you have to be like, hey, it's time to change course?
Yeah. Well,
All depends on their resources, it depends on the team, it depends on whether we still have faith in them.
yeah. I mean, there's
Depends on
different.
other investors.
I'd say mostly it depends on the founders. I mean, we're not driving their companies or running their companies, they are. I think as investors, at least for us, probably both of our programs, we're minority investors in the company. We're not taking board seats. We're not making their decisions about where to go. We can give them feedback, and often that might be very harsh and strong feedback. But I think for us, a lot of it is really just like, is the product working? Do customers want to buy it? Are they making money? Do they have a shot at making money? And can they grow?
Is your go-to-market strategy right? Are you setting yourself up to fail? Like I'm dealing with a company right now that just joined the program, and they want to launch crowdfunding next month. They don't know their manufacturing plan. They don't know exactly who their customers are, and I'm trying to pull them back. Like you only get to go to crowdfunding once. You only get one first date. Don't screw it up. Make sure you're prepared for it.
Show up showered in a nice car.
Yeah,
yeah. Brush your teeth beforehand. All
Some
that
people
good
have
stuff.
different ideas of what works. I think, I think giving people a reality check on what can work and what can't work is helpful, and sometimes that's the other companies in the accelerator or previous companies that have gone through the program. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes we're wrong too. I think we're looking for founders who are a little bit crazy, but not too crazy, and there's kind of a fine line between genius and insanity that we try and ride. But you want people who are going to take risks, just not stupid risks.
What would you say is, maybe it's needing to slow your roll a little bit and being like, hey, let's not go to crowdfunding right? What are some of the kind of rookie mistakes that you do see that you wish you could just tell people, like, take a step back and address these things before you even possibly go to like these next stages?
I mean, on the hardware front, it's assuming that you'll be able to finish manufacturing in 6 months. On the company formation front, it's not knowing who you're founding the company with.
I think that's a big one, is really getting to know your co-founders well. A lot of times we tend to prefer people who've worked together before, at least for 6 to 12 months, if not longer. There's a lot of things where we're really, unfortunately, I don't think it's like people going to market too quickly is usually the problem. Usually it's the opposite problem, people waiting too long to ship or not getting customer feedback early enough. Sometimes it's being overly optimistic about funding. I think even people who come out here who are familiar with what goes on, maybe are overly optimistic about how easy it is to raise $1 million.
You probably hear a lot about like, oh, well, whoever made it. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but different sets of circumstances, different people involved. And
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of things that I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago used to be much harder to figure out, and we can probably help them compress that now into maybe 6 months to a year. I think just the amount of resources and access that are available, both online and in Silicon Valley and through investor platforms like AngelList and others, it's dramatically easier, in my opinion, to get a company off the ground now. Used to be 15, 20 years ago, you had to know a certain set of people. You really needed to figure out what was going on without having access to a bunch of user groups or online
You had to get
forums.
your own servers.
Yes,
And
you had
now,
to pay,
it's a credit card.
pay Oracle a couple $1 million for database software and Sun a couple $1 million for some hardware, and maybe companies like Exodus, which probably no one remembers here, that used to host servers. But
Yeah,
now,
I remember at Mongo Music in 2000, we had Oracle.
It's so easy these
You're
days.
using
Kids
real-
my day used to walk uphill both ways to school before they launched an e-commerce project.
so yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are still far from perfect with the startup world, but there are a lot of things which are much faster and easier, and hopefully we're helpful.
Great. Let's talk briefly about pitching, because you seem to be very passionate about the way people pitch things and trying to get people to kind of come out of their shells. And it's a hugely important part of any
Yes.
presentation. You know, a lot of this is being like, give me a lot of money, please. Give for this idea
That
that,
sounds
may
like
or
a
may
great
not work.
pitch. You
Right?
should come
Thank
over
you.
and-
That's my, yeah. That's my elevator pitch to you. Give me a lot of money, please. No, but you know, it's a hugely important part. Can you talk about like, some of the challenges of maybe getting people who are behind the scenes people to have to be in front of large audiences in a very kind of high stakes scenario?
It's hours on stage. You have to put yourself out there, and a lot of people they've never done it before, and it just takes time. They just have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it.
I think there's a lot of folks who come from an engineering or nerdy background who are not used to public speaking, and strangely, I used to be one of those people. I was deathly afraid of public speaking, probably 20 years ago, I guess. And most of my training was not like on stage. It was mostly, engineering background, although I was a bit of a drama theater geek in high school. But I think the thing is most folks get far too into the weeds, or they want to be Steve Jobs and tell this very long and elaborate story. And we do want a little bit of magic in what they're saying, but primarily we try and coach people to really focus on the numbers if they have, some amount of traction is what we call it. So whether they've got a product, got customers, got users, got revenue, got funding, those are all different measures of traction. And so a lot of the pitch that we try and teach people is really what we call kind of a traction sandwich. Like, here's the numbers, establish some credibility quickly, then tell the customer problem framework story. Here's the customer's problem, here's our solution to that problem, here's some proof that that works, and then kind of finish up with traction and then get the hell off stage. And try and do that quickly and clearly first. And a lot of people want to be entertaining while they're doing that. That's sort of the next level, but first level is just be fucking clear. Try and be concise and brief. And then if you can work in some entertainment in there after you accomplish those goals, that's great. But
And your pitches are 2 minutes long?
3 minutes, although we encourage people to take less time if possible. They hardly ever take that advice.
So ours is 4, but we also usually work in like a demo because it's hardware.
Yeah.
And we would do less if we could.
Pretty much you're winning the customer or the audience attention within the first 30 seconds or not. And if you aren't sexy or interesting in the first 30 seconds, it's unlikely you're going to get a lot more sexy or interesting in the 3 to 5 minutes or longer. So sometimes, usually less is more.
Absolutely, yeah. So not everyone is lucky enough to get advice from you guys directly.
Yes. How we're so fucking important.
But they're probably getting a lot of advice from other sources. And what would you say, and sometimes it's really tough. It's maybe somebody who's close to you. It's family sometimes. It's friends you've worked with for a really long time. But that doesn't always mean it's good advice. So what do you guys feel about sort of trusting yourself and doing a gut check versus kind of taking feedback from these other sources?
Well, our advice isn't always correct either.
Ultimately, it's your company. It's your product. And so even when I'm talking with companies about whether or not they should do crowdfunding, it's like ultimately they have to live with the decision. They know their bank accounts. They know their risk tolerance. But the number one thing they shouldn't lie to themselves about is what their customers want. And so like getting the product in the hands of your potential users, that's stuff that you can't ignore.
I think both the feedback from other entrepreneurs who've done some of the things before is important, as well as getting feedback of customers who are using your product. And we still depend a lot on the entrepreneur's intuition about what they want to do, where they feel the product can go. But you probably shouldn't ignore people who've gone through that process a couple of times, and you shouldn't ignore the people who are buying or using your product.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, there's actually a great book by my friend Dan Shapiro called The Hot Seat, which is about his experiences as like a 5-time CEO. That's just like 45 different vignettes about it. And he was ex-Googler as well.
I mean, that actually leads me to another question. What are some of the kind of inspiration sources, aside from maybe people who have gone through this process before, that you do send your folks to? Either books or speakers in real life?
We gave everyone at Highway 1 this class, The Hot Seat, which is his book. And then we bring in Eric Ries to speak, the Lean Startup.
Eric Ries, who's the author of Lean Startup. And yeah, I think, there's a lot of folks who are very knowledgeable, and, some of them, if not many of them, have started companies before, but most of the feedback that I think is more valuable is coming from other founders, some of whom haven't been around the block that long and aren't necessarily household names, but have been through those experiences, more recently. We do fireside chats with some of our founders, a few of whom have actually, started companies or exited companies, raised tens, if not hundreds of millions, and a few of them have hired or acquired thousands of people. But a lot of times hearing the stories from other folks who are, maybe still running 10-person companies or 20-person companies who just went through it a year or two earlier, it somehow maybe seems a little bit more authentic.
Yeah, we really try and connect our cohorts together. So like the first week, we do a Bay Area factory tour so that they're stuck on a bus, getting to know each other. And we take them to China so they can see Chinese manufacturing, and they really bond during that trip.
Sometimes we take them over here, actually. We do field trips to Google and Facebook and YouTube and other companies in the Bay Area that are a little bit larger than our startups. And some of that's really to get to know the different product groups and things that are going on. Sometimes it's just to get to know people in the companies who've been through the process before.
Great. I think this show sounds like it's also going to be a great way to kind of open up that process and say maybe you guys a little bit of the time on being like, look, these are the people who've gone through it before.
Yeah.
But what's one thing?
Sometimes learning from failure also can be
It's an important process. It's true. Like you absolutely sometimes need to fail in order to know what it is to succeed. And what's one thing you hope that people kind of take away from being able to see this in depth into this process?
That it's a lot of work, but that it can be a lot of fun.
I think hopefully buying the bobblehead dolls with our heads on them. And
Merchandising! Lots of exclusives.
We get more margin on the T-shirts.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
T-shirts.
I think, it's really a chance to tell the story of Silicon Valley a little bit more upfront and in person. Again, you can watch movies like The Social Network or read books about Google or Amazon founders, and there's a piece of that world which is probably real. I used to work for Sean Parker. I do know some of those stories. I know a lot of folks who founded companies in the Valley, but I think also just really getting a chance to see, I won't say normal people, but geeky individuals that you might meet in real life who face all the struggles of starting a company, learning how to be, a leader, or sometimes not measuring up to that.
I think also it's like we have all different types of people who are starting companies in this. Like we had a Dutch team, we had a team that's super passionate about aquariums and just decided to dive into tech. Where are some of your teams from?
We have a lot of folks from all over the world, actually. Probably close to half, sometimes even more than half of our companies are from outside the US. And hopefully they're not always as white and male as some of Silicon Valley is. I think that's still a challenge we all face. But at least, maybe a little bit more female, non-white, and not quite...
I wouldn't mind seeing that.
So
I
we'll
think,
see.
we are in a very diverse world. It's no longer just Silicon Valley. It's China. It's all these other companies. There are different people on the map who are, who have great ideas and are presented. So it's great to see like that sort of being represented and working on being represented.
Yeah, I think it's a big focus for us. We've been, investing outside the U.S. for the last 5 years. We have probably done investments in over 50 countries and have about 300 companies out of the portfolio that didn't start in the U.S. It's not to say it's still not a little bit more white and male than maybe we would prefer, and I'm not always the poster child for diversity efforts, but I'm trying. We have a lot of other folks on our team who do represent, different walks of life.
I think being aware of the problem and trying is the first, definitely the first step. Can you guys think of a startup that you kind of felt was maybe going to be a big gamble that you went, you know what, we're going for it, and that paid off? Or not?
I think almost every startup.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually, one company, I mean, from our first batch, Q, was at-home medical diagnostics, and you could test to see if you have the flu or inflammation, and I just didn't believe them, like that it would. I was like, that's like Jetson stuff. Like, how are they able to do that? And some doctor friends were like, no, they could do that. It's really hard, but they could do it, and so they've done pretty well.
I think probably one of ours that's one of the more fun stories. We invested in a company called Maven that was started by a black founder who I think is also black and Jewish and speaks Mandarin, but that's kind of besides the point. But the company was basically powering e-commerce for beauty sites, beauticians that focus on the African American beauty market, basically hair weaves and a lot of other stuff. And that company has done fabulously well. They just raised over $10 million from Andreessen Horowitz, although the first 2 years weren't quite as easy. I think when we first invested in the company, my partner Christine and I were eager to try that out, but we obviously both weren't, neither of us were customers. But I think it was the kind of story that we felt like was an underrepresented market. And we weren't doing it out of charity, we were doing it out of
Oh, it's a huge market. It's
greed to some extent. And it's really been great to see that company totally kick ass and now is employing over 50 people in Oakland and doing, I won't share all the numbers, but I think tens of millions we'll see in revenue. So that's maybe a very non-traditional Silicon Valley story.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to throw it to audience questions in a moment, but I wanted to know what's an area of tech that you guys are excited to see more development in? You've mentioned medical is definitely an emerging kind of more home market.
I think Brady's got the more SyFy sort of esque stories to tell here.
I like wearing my Fitbit, but it doesn't actually do anything for me right now. I want things that give me superpowers.
Okay.
And so we have a company with us right now that actually improves recovery time from athletics. So, and you could picture these, it's like currently $1,000 machines that they have at football players, and these would be $100 stockings that you could wear while skiing, and then when you're on the lift, it will help pump the blood up and help you recover faster. And you can wear it on planes, stuff like that. That's the type of thing I'm looking for.
Sounds like pantyhose for seniors. I might need that. I might need that soon.
You just have the marketing thing down for me.
Yeah, I can work
Sold.
I think we tend to work on stuff that's a little less sexy than the space age
Pantyhose
stuff.
for seniors?
Yeah, exactly. That's right in the market.
Huge market.
A lot of things that we focus on tend to be very straightforward e-commerce and SaaS and marketplace stories, but those are happening in a lot of interesting places now for us. So sometimes it's more about where we're doing that work than what. And so getting to see e-commerce in Africa or SaaS in India or Southeast Asia is actually pretty exciting and hopefully also makes us some money.
And since this is SyFy, what is one kind of future technology that you'd like to see realized in our lifetime? Be it the replicator from Star Trek or phasers?
Wormhole, teleportation, more sleep. Can I get an extra 2 hours a day?
Oh, that would be really nice.
That'd be really nice.
would
I think
be
for everyone
super
here, we'd all love that.
Tribbles.
There's some trouble with those.
Yeah. Wow.
I work in a nerdy company too, don't worry. And finally, we see plenty of startups be successful. Well, what's one thing that you truly think differentiates a rock star startup? You can say advice from you two, being in your accelerators.
I hate to say basic things like customers, but that's probably where it comes from. I think a little bit of insanity is probably necessary. People who don't always listen to what you say. I mean, as much as it's we're supposed to be nerd whisperers and helping people figure out their startups, a lot of times the best entrepreneurs are the ones who don't listen to us and who teach us things.
Yeah, I definitely want people who are willing to carry through and get things done. Like that's so much of a startup is just about execution and actually doing what they say they're going to do.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Talk a little bit more about the motivation and strategy for getting involved at this stage of investing. So it's like seed stage, early stage, especially given like, you take minority stakes and you don't have as much skin in the game. So it's like, what's the motivation behind that?
It's probably a labor of love more than anything else. The question was, why do we get involved so early when companies are more likely to fail? We don't have minority ownership, and basically we have absolutely no control over outcomes. One thing is the companies are less expensive. So when we're investing at early stage, valuations are low. Also, it's less competitive to get into those companies in many cases than when they raise capital from other larger folks if they're more successful.
And if we're structuring our programs right, we increase the value of the companies in a very short amount of time.
I think we're generally trying to focus on companies that have challenges around product market fit and early customer acquisition and growth. So working around product and marketing are areas that we tend to focus on a lot. As companies get much larger, things start to change into real more organizational scale and operationalizing a lot of process, and frankly, those are kind of fucking boring, and I don't want to do that. So it's a lot more interesting to work with people when teams are small, stakes are frankly higher, and we can build a relationship with them and really, hopefully, be impactful around the product vision and around the initial customer acquisition. But I don't know. I guess it's really kind of more what people's appetite are for what stage of the process they want to be active in.
Thank you.
One of the reasons that I started Highway 1 is to help bring things into the world that otherwise wouldn't happen. There aren't that many resources for hardware startups. And hardware startups can get hurt really easily by bad decisions. So going to manufacturing too early, or not having good partners, not knowing how to model out the revenue or their inventory. And so that's what we try and teach them how to do.
Hey, so I've got a lot of good advice from Brady over the years, but startup advice, startups get so much advice from so many different people, and so much of it is contradictory. What advice?
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes.
What advice do you have?
It's kind of meta.
Listen, but then decide on your own.
I think the idea is that you want to get feedback from different sources and at least hear a range of opinions. I would say I tend to take feedback more thoughtfully from people who've done similar things before, either on the investor or the entrepreneur side. Again, a lot of that feedback doesn't necessarily come from us, it comes from other entrepreneurs. But yeah, you're going to get a lot of opinions. Opinions are kind of like assholes. Everybody's got one. They all smell bad. It's up to you to figure out which of those you kind of want to take to heart.
Thanks. What is the profile or characteristic of a group of a project or already a formed company that should go into Accelerator, and what companies or projects should not go into Accelerator?
Depends on the accelerator and depends on the company, but do you want to talk about yours?
Yeah. We look for companies that are looking to be venture-backed. So if you're not interested in taking VC, then Highway 1's probably not the right program for you, and I would think that's true with a lot of accelerators. And in our case, we focus exclusively on hardware. So if you're not doing hardware, then we end up getting applications for software companies. But we look for teams that have a prototype, 2 to 4 people. Hopefully they've raised a couple $100,000. They're past Arduino, but they've shared it out to their customers. They've done some customer validation. And we'll take them from there. And in those first weeks, we introduce them to designers, industrial design firms, and start to move them towards a looks like, works like prototype. And that's our kind of general MO. And then after they leave us, they head to manufacturing. So it's kind of a company that's on the cusp of having their final product.
I think for us, we tend to focus on companies that have specific stage of product development and early customer acquisition where we can be helpful in scaling that up. So we're generally not looking for companies that are only concepts and not even just functional prototype, but probably if they're revenue generating maybe $5,000 to $25,000 a month, between maybe $50,000 to $100,000 a year, and in some cases more than that. But the emphasis we're going to try and do is, can we figure out ways to be helpful in scaling customer channels by 10x, if that's possible. Emphasis tends to be on online customer acquisition. So how do we use paid and organic platforms, search, social, mobile, video, local. A lot of efforts tend to look at maybe Google for paid or organic search, Facebook and Twitter for social, Apple and Android for mobile. Other things we're looking at now are probably YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, but even other platforms that are just text and messaging. I think we've been looking a lot at like WeChat, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, other messaging platforms is now an initial platform for growth. So there's a lot of like we want to see is early customer usage and revenue, but not so much that the company's already off to the races and scaling. And then trying to help them figure out online customer acquisition techniques, not just product development. So there's a big issue with a lot of companies, not limited to just Silicon Valley. It's like going to build feature all day long, and then, oh, marketing will happen later, and our product will be so amazing that everybody will just tell everybody, and it'll all work based on viral growth and word of mouth, and that's usually bullshit. And the product marketing concepts and campaigns are as much a part of the product as anything.
So actually, to follow up pretty much with what you just said there, I work with a lot of startups that come to Google and are looking, they're usually post-Series A, a lot B2B and SaaS, and may not have had some of the advice that you've been trying to pass on about growth marketing strategy being an early part of your focus, and trying to make that sort of an organic part of your sort of growth pattern. So we get a lot of post-Series A, they bring on 5 new people who are going to be hired to do acquisition, who might not have been part of the founding team, and have all of a sudden these huge scaling goals in order to meet what they've promised their investors. And in many ways then want us to do that for them. What advice do you have for those companies that have not already started to get the groundwork laid earlier in the process, but are already now at the point of trying to prove themselves with a little bit less experience coming in than we may have hoped for?
Probably take a few classes in human psychology, I would say. Strangely, how much money someone's raised is not often correlated with how far along they are in their customer acquisition strategies, and a lot of people tend to think they can just buy growth later, whether that's through hires or throwing money at paid acquisition platforms. I think fundamentally we want people to look at what's the initial activation and retention sort of cycle with their customers, and is that working? And to really dig in on that first. Trying to force a lot of users through a leaky bucket is not going to be an excellent strategy if that's very expensive. So the first thing we're really trying to understand is, do people use the product and do they come back? And do they tell other people, or at least do they have a positive opinion of the product? And then starting to look at channels for growth if that first set of activation and retention tests is met. But I think that the hack that we're really trying to bring to a lot of people is the fact that everybody thinks technology platforms is what's changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And indeed, that's true. Prices have come down and things are less expensive. But the really dramatic change that actually has happened is around human behavior and social behavior and communication, and that people have dramatically shifted behaviors from television, print, and radio to online platforms. And that's a really interesting way to expose them to new products and services and for them to learn about stuff. And we really are not very good at figuring out how to do marketing on those platforms. And for a lot of geeks, that sounds like an unnecessary evil. They really, salespeople are bad. That's how I used to think. I was a programmer, and I was like, salespeople are a necessary evil I tolerate to maybe get customers and raise money, but otherwise, they're scum-sucking dirtbags, and I really don't want to have anything to do with them. And now I'm in sales. Like, well, there are some redeeming qualities. But I think the idea is around understanding that there's a world of customers out there that are reachable to you via some amount of calculated marketing techniques. It's not to say that things aren't still going to be creative, but there are billions of people on all those platforms, and some of them are from Google, some of them are from Facebook, some of them are from Tencent and Baidu and Alibaba, and kind of learning what that world is all about and how we interact with them is a skill set that I think most Silicon Valley engineers and founders still don't understand well.
Over here.
Yeah, so in a way, a follow-up to this last question. Yesterday, I was at a bookstore in Mountain View. I saw Forbes magazine. I think it was the founder of Slack now.
Butterfield.
And I think he has a background in philosophy. And the whole piece of this month was around the increasing importance in non-technical founders in the Valley. I think, at least as far as I know, everything that I had in mind was always, these MBAs that just want the technical guys to build this stuff and who don't understand really what's going on.
Inherently evil. They just they're just drawn that way.
Exactly. So on the one thing, what's your view on non-technical founders, and what do you look for in teams that get to your accelerators or want to work with you?
I mean, Stuart's been in technology for decades now. I mean, Slack is not. He didn't just dream up Slack.
He started this other little company called Flickr.
Yeah, he keeps trying. He started a game called Game Never Ending. That turned into Flickr. Then he started another game called Glitch, and that turned into Slack.
Someday he's really going to prove himself.
Yeah, someday he'll figure it out.
He's really going to get that game thing.
But Stuart is a
non-technical?
He must be technical. Just because just because he has a philosophy degree, he must know how to program.
I think.
Yeah. I mean, he's partnered with Cal Henderson.
You're saying just because he has social skills, he's non-technical?
Yeah. No, maybe not so much about. This was just the example. Yeah, but in general, not about him, but in general, what's your view?
I mean,
on,
I'm pretty sure he was
co-founder?
doing web consulting before he started Game Never Ending.
He's been, probably in the Valley. Well, sorry, Vancouver in the Valley, I guess.
Yeah, Vancouver's bouncing back and forth.
15 years, 10.
Canadian Valley,
but
right?
I think if you're the person, if you are a clear thinker and you are able to get things done and you are able to build a team, then you don't need to be technical. Kevin Rose.
What? What?
It's true. Kevin Rose somewhat famously paid a developer $5,000 to build the first version of Dig, and then was able to raise some funding based on that.
Poland or Eastern Europe, something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I think having basic functional skills in programming and design and marketing are probably goals for all of us. Not just startup people, but actually everyone.
Being able to write well?
And I think, yeah, really.
Grammar?
But I think there's this weird focus on programming these days, which I kind of think people are missing the ball. There's everybody's like, girls should code. And I'm like, yes, and my little girl, I kind of want to be running the fucking company, not just coding. So I have a little higher aspirations for her than just coding. And so programming is important, but there tends to be this thing in the Valley, the top of the food chain is programming. And I really think that's kind of misplaced. I mean, and I say that starting out as someone who was a programmer and programmed since 11 or 12, and I took my final in college high and got an A+, but whatever on programming. But there was a time at which I was like, okay, I'm good at programming, and running a company is not just about that as much as really amazing programmers definitely have an advantage, and companies that have them definitely have an advantage.
But if you're doing a tech startup, you need to be tech literate. And so I think that's probably, I mean, that's what Stuart ended up doing over the years. So he probably taught himself how to program, and
design and
doesn't
UX
need to
are really
anymore.
important.
Yeah.
Understanding marketing concepts is really important, whether those are creative or quantitative. And just learning how to deal with people and interacting with them is pretty fucking important.
Being able to understand your customer.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more holistic than just coding.
And what do you look at in teams that apply for the accelerators?
For us, primarily product and customers. I think we want to look at the product and see how it works and operates, and we want to understand customer reactions to product.
And in our case, I want to see that they've actually built something, that they've been working on this, and that they have the skills to carry it forward.
I think, everybody talks about team all fucking day long, and yes, team is the most important thing. Except your ability to tell what that team's all about in 3 or 4 meetings over the case of a couple of weeks is pretty limited. So unless you've actually done extensive due diligence over periods of months, if not years, it's going to be hard for you to understand whether that team is amazing or not. And so one of the reasons we really want to see founders who have worked together is at least they've assured themselves that they're not, the other person isn't crazy. And then we kind of want to look at maybe some historical work that they've done, could be at a company or could be at a school or something, but probably the most important thing is what's my direct experience of their product, and what's the customer's experience of that product, and are KPIs moving in the right direction? I think it's really easy for people to make gut decisions about whether they think teams are amazing or not, and I think that probably ends up being why a lot of teams are white and male, is because most of the people making decisions are white and male, and it's a little easier for them to make those gut decisions when they're things that are familiar to them. You miss a lot of great opportunities if you do that. Not to say that there aren't very talented white and male founders.
Hi. I have a question for David. Is that I think I remember from one of your talk is that your inspiration to have 500 startup is you have lots of data points to improve your kind of decision making into which company to investing in, right?
The goal was not to have 500 startups, although that was the name of the company. It was simply to choose a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of our philosophy about investing is basically that we are not always great stock pickers, but if we have a larger portfolio, we'll find success.
My question is your decision making improved over the year or not?
I have no fucking idea.
Is IRR of Fund 2 better than Fund 1?
Yes, that is true. Probably by at least 500 basis points, I think. Not to say that one isn't bad. One's performing pretty good too. But I mean, I'm not investing in all the companies anymore. We have about 20. We have 75 people in the company. About 20 of those are making investment decisions, and our goal is really to scale the investing process so that many people are making many decisions globally all the time, and 500 is actually a relatively small number for what we're eventually aiming for. I think strangely, the venture capital industry, as much as it's all about scale and technology, is pretty hypocritical and hasn't done either of those things well itself. And the largest VC funds right now probably aren't much more than 100 people. Most of them are far less than that. So scaling the organization globally and doing thousands, if not tens of thousands of investments, and eventually hundreds of thousands or possibly millions is our goal. That may sound fucking crazy, but I think building a startup with 500 to 1,000 people seems sort of pedestrian, almost small. To think of a VC fund that has 500 to 1,000 people seems wacky, but there's a lot of innovation left to do in the venture industry.
I think Benchmark has 6, I think.
Yeah, they're so small, gosh. Well, except in height.
I think they stopped
Bill's
there.
pretty tall.
I think we had time for one more audience question.
You talked a bit about execution failures. What do those look like? Is it people running out of stamina?
When we fail to kill people, that's execution failure.
I mean, for a Highway 1 team, it's often a poor technology decision that they then just waste a lot of time on. Or wasting time on the wrong person pitching when that person's not delivering and they need someone else, or a bad hire. It's often kind of like a decision that routes them and wastes their time.
There's just a ton of different ways to fuck up a startup. And most of those are involved not delivering product for customers, but there's also hiring fail, there's developing a product that people love but you're not making enough money about, or there's not being able to scale that to larger audiences. So it's hard to sort of say there's kind of one or very specific things. There's just lots and lots of different ways.
But we inevitably, I mean, we just started this next batch, but we'll have 2 or 3 founders leave during the program. That's the most common fail case that we see within the program.
On that very positive note.
Sorry.
No, but it's, sometimes it's necessary. And if it's not right for you guys, it's not right for them, why continue on that path? But with that, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's give a round of applause.